Hello and welcome to our online class like we did it the other day. Uh, Today we'll be taking up one more new topic, that is how to assess or evaluate a comprehension. So we know that this comprehension is something which is generally asked in almost all competitive exams which we have. So first let us understand the meaning of the word comprehension. It means to comprehend. Comprehend means to understand. So what are they trying to what are the examiners trying to test you through a comprehension? They are trying to test your understanding level, your skill, and your given set of skills like vocabulary, your writing capability, most importantly your understanding capability of a passage within the given period of time. So that's why we use the word comprehend or comprehend. So from there we have the word comprehension, which means that you will be given a passage which needs to be analyzed and understood within a given point of time. So now there are a few tricks and hacks which we need to know while analyzing a comprehension. So when we are being given with a set of passage, one or more than one, in certain exams the pattern goes like there is one longish comprehension which is like one of 800 words or 1000 words generally, which are asked in your civil service examinations. But there could be also another like when we have 250 300 words of comprehensions which and there are multiple, there are more than one which you have to answer. For example, there will be 2 or 3 number of passages given to you in one single set of examination which you will be asked to read, understand and then answer the given questions. So for understanding those, there will be a few basic rules which we will take up because they are used for all the comprehensions wherever you are being asked to analyze them. So the first would be, whenever we are given a set of passage, do not, if you read the first line and you find that you cannot comprehend the meaning of it, please do not get scared. That's okay, because generally in examinations comprehensions come towards the earlier part of your answering sections. So if you do not understand, just leave maybe the first line for a while and try going to the next line. Okay, so that is the first rule. Do not get afraid by seeing a comprehension whose meaning you cannot understand. That is fine. Maybe often the first lines of the comprehensions are very cryptic, because comprehensions are taken out of passages and longer paragraphs or sometimes books, novels, whatever. So it often happens that they have lifted the paragraph up from somewhere. So what happens is we do not understand the first line. It seems very cryptic. So could be that you do not understand the first line. Just try reading a little beyond the first line. Maybe 2-3 lines. Even if you do not understand, try keep reading it. So once when you have seen that you have read a little more, you will see that maybe things have started making a little more sense. So that is the first thing. Try reading it. So now when we talk about reading a comprehension, there can be 2 types of reading a passage. The 2 types of the reading would be, one is known as the scanning and one is known as the scheming. So we need to know which one we should use for what. The first is the scanning and the other is the scheming. So what is there for scanning and what is there for scheming? What does scanning mean? Scanning means just as we scan a set of question or something that exactly is reproduced. It is exactly reproducible. That is called a scanned reading. And scheming means we take a glance. We take a glance at what we are reading. So there can be 2 ways of reading. There can be either a scheming or there can be a scanning. So first, when we are going through the passage, of course keep in mind the time that you have. It will, in every question, wherever they give any sort of questions, of course comprehensions included, it will, remember, it should always be a, what you should always have in mind is your time management. Whenever this applies for all the questions, whenever you are being given a question paper set, first see the number of questions you have to do and then see what is the time you have. And this practice cannot be built up in a day. So what I advise all the examiners to understand is, every time you are practicing a comprehension or you're practicing any question, what you should do is you should know how to practice and finish it off within a certain point of time. And once you know how to manage it within your time, for example, you have 5 questions and you have 2 hours, you should exactly be able to divide those 2 hours into the 5 questions so that you can devote equal amount of time for all those questions. But of course, there is also another fact that not all questions take equal amount of time. And also there is one more factor which we should always keep in mind, that certain points are our fortes. We are better at certain things and we are not so good at certain things. So it might just happen that your forte is not comprehension. Maybe you are good at correcting the errors. Maybe you are good at the specific grammatical structures like articles, tenses, and comprehension is not your forte. But what you cannot do is you cannot avoid this, because you cannot mostly avoid any questions in competitive exams. So it is better, I mean, you would probably know, if you do not have negative mark, that is one advantage of it. But if you have, we have to be very careful about it, because if we have negative mark and we are answering wrong, it means that instead of adding something, we are subtracting from the marks which have obtained from the other questions. So the first step that comes towards solving any question is the time management. Remember that we cannot go so much overboard with any of the questions so that you reduce your time ineffectively for the next questions which you are supposed to answer. So what, always remember, for example, maybe you have 20 minutes time for maybe 10 questions that you have to answer from one given set of passage. So remember that, again, micro divide the time, again micromanage, just learn micromanaging your time. Just micromanage your time. Remember, if you have 10 minutes for 20 questions, you are supposed to further subdivide that 20 minutes, that is 2 minutes per question. And remember, we are not supposed to spend more than that. If we are spending more than that, what happens is at the end, we will inherently lose marks on other questions because you maybe just did not have the time to go over that question. So micromanage your time to the level of how much time you should give for every question. It is, for example, there are 1, 2 in Roman, like 3, 4 questions. So under 1, maybe there are 5 questions. So micromanage your time, that how much time can you devote for each of the 5 questions. That is the first strategy towards solving any question, not just comprehension. That is the first strategy that is needed for solving any question in competitive exams, and more so in comprehensions. Why? So we'll now come to the reading part of it to explain why micromanaging time is very important. Because maybe let us take in the first glance that we read a comprehension and we understood nothing of it, almost nothing. So then what? Then should we leave it? Should we give up on it? No, certainly not. We do not have the laxity to give up on that. So what we are supposed to do is, we are supposed to, of course, reread it, but not that always rereading it. Of course, I would be taking this as a point that you all have practiced something at home, and only with that you have gone to the hall to solve the questions. If you have never practiced and just like that is the first comprehension that you are seeing in the exam hall, probably nothing is going to work for you. But hoping that you all have read something, you all have solved a few questions, we'll come to this, the scan reading and the scheme reading. The first read for the comprehension cannot be a scan reading, that will take up too much of your time. So the first reading has to be a scheme reading, that is glancing through the read. Just take a quick look at things and read, give a fast reading of the passage. What happens in the fast reading is you will not understand all the points, and that is perfectly acceptable that you will not. Next, after the scheme reading, you will go to the questions. Quickly take a look at the questions which you have to answer. So once you have taken a look at the questions which you have to answer, now you have certain idea about from where you will be able to answer the questions, because you have skimmed through the paragraph or the passage once. So you now have some idea about this, right? So now once you have seen the 5 questions, take a pencil. If it's a hard copy question, and if it's an online question, well, then we don't have the opportunity to do that. But at least now go back to the passage. Once you go back to the passage, take the questions, mark roughly the areas, mark the areas, mark the areas from where you are supposed to answer those questions. Now, for example, maybe we go to the first question and we are finding certain words difficult in the passage which we don't understand. That is a major problem of the aspirants in all examinations, that maybe you are not very well developed in your vocabulary. So the thing that I tell all my students are, the only way to develop your vocabulary, it is certainly not in the examination hall. The way to develop your vocabulary would be through reading every day. Try reading at least a paragraph for a day. I mean, if nothing, I mean, we don't even have to get newspapers nowadays. We have everything coming in our phones. Try and read the newspapers, the web versions of it. We can try reading from apps like there are different apps which gives you shortened news. We have different apps which work along with the video news. So you can take any of them and try and read, not just listen. Listening will certainly help. If you have that level of dedication that you will listen to something and then get down and find out that meaning and go and find it from the dictionary or searching Google or an online or web dictionary, that is perfectly fine. But if you do not have the dedication, if you think that is too much of a task, try and read something which is visible to you with your eyes. What happens is quickly mark those words and then find those meanings to those answers. So that is one thing. Even if you learn one word a day, that amounts to 365 words a day. Even if I'm leaving out 65 days at a gross, even if you're learning 300 words a day, I mean, even if you leave 65 days out of a year, you are still learning 300 new words. And developing vocabulary is supremely important, especially for the UPSCs and your examinations like defense services, combined defense services, all these examinations. They're extremely important. And also people appearing for UGC net, also there are passages which you are supposed to, maybe they wouldn't have very difficult vocabulary, but still they could be based on statistical information and all those. If that is so, then it is fine. If not, you would be needing this vocabulary part. Now once you have marked the answers, maybe you will find that there are certain words which you do not understand the meaning of. So what do we do when we do not understand the meaning of a certain word? What we are supposed to do is, we'll not panic about it, most importantly. And if you start panicking once with one of your questions, remember that your performance for your entire examination goes down. Please keep your cool and calm in your examination hall. That is the first thing that you should remember. Maybe you cannot solve one question, maybe you will be able to solve other questions. So the first thing is, then go over to the scan reading of the passage. Now once you have started the scan reading of the passage, what happens is, you have found words which you don't know the meaning of. Read the line, but of course read the line keeping the time count in hand. Do not waste so much. Always focus on the time. Remember, if you have 20 minutes of stipulated time to solve a question by the formula I told you, in dividing your questions according to the time which you have, remember, you should not go overboard with it. Maybe going 5 minutes of overboard is fine, but the 20 minutes should not become 40. If you cannot finish it within 25-30 minutes, leave the question. Come to the next one which you are supposed to. Just leave some space for it. And if it's online, there's no question of leaving space. You can just toggle the questions up and below, up, top, down, bottom, wherever and however you are supposed to. But if that is not the case, do not waste your time on any single question way too much, because this inherently happens with people who are not very good in vocabulary, that they keep trying reading and trying grasping the meaning of the thing. Try as much as your time allows you to. Please keep this in mind. It is the time and its management which would help you to pass through examinations and get better results. If you spend, for example, maybe finally you are able to do the comprehension at the end of 2 hours, it will actually not give you any result, because what happens is that makes you leave all the other questions which were there to be answered, which you could have answered far easier than the comprehension. We are making this in order to make you aware about how to answer comprehension. So that's why we are focusing with so much of importance on comprehension, because it is a common part in almost all examinations, national level examinations, which we are appearing for. So now what happens is, try reading the line 2-3 times. If you find that it's still becoming very difficult, try and leave that line, understand the rest of it, and then try and mark your answers from the given. If it is the MCQ, well, that is fine. Then you will mostly these days examinations are MCQs. So of course you will have the options. That is one good thing. At least you can look at your options and decide which is the nearest to the one which you think is true by reading the rest of the passage. That is one very good thing if you have the MCQ options. But also on the other hand, MCQs might make things difficult for you, because when the options, of course, options which are given are not chalk and cheese. Options are very close to one another. All the options in certain examinations, all the options might just seem that all of them are right. We would have to again micro focus on word by word about what it is trying to tell you. One very important thing about comprehensions is try answering your questions with exactly what is given in the passage, not by your prior knowledge. Do not assume things. I tell this again and again, and I'm saying this again, that do not try and assume things. Just read what is given in the passage and try answering your questions based on that. Do not try and assume things like as if you read this somewhere back long time ago and you think, okay, this is applicable here, could be applicable, but do not bring that judgment in while answering the question. Bring the judgment which you have got from just by scanning or scheme reading the comprehension. So read what is given and try and find out your meaning from there, not from your prior knowledge is needed to understand. But please, when you have the options, be very prudent while choosing the options, that they should be the closest to the one that is given in the passage, not closest to the one about what you have read somewhere other times, earlier times. So that is the first thing. So this way what you can do is, you can go from one question to another. Maybe there are 5 questions or 10 questions. Try answering first. Then you can try first roughly, as I have told you, mark the answers from where you have to answer them, and once you have marked them, you can do this. So once you have marked the area from where you have found out the answers, you can roughly go and try answering them one after the other. So maybe there are 5 questions and you have been able to solve the first 3 in one go. After you have solved the first 3 in one go, what you are supposed to do is, maybe if you have time enough, come back to the next 2. If you do not, at least try and leave them for then, so that you can attempt the rest of the questions and then at least come back to it. So that is one thing which we are supposed to do. So now, if it happens that you are being able to solve the majority of it, fine. If it seems that it is becoming too difficult for you, that you cannot solve the majority of it, maybe you can try extending, just take a look at the rest of the question paper and see how much time you think you would need to solve them. So if you think you can solve them faster, one thing that you can do is, you can try solving those first and then coming back to this passage, because typically for people it might just take them a longer time solving the comprehension. So what we can do then is, first try and answer the parts which you think are easier. But then again, given the time, learn balancing your time, which is the primary factor in any competitive examination. So once you have come back from the questions which you thought were easier for you, now finally you have come back and you can settle down with your questions here. So the ones which you had gone through scheme reading, now you can sit down, scan every word by word of it and try and find out the closest meaning, and keep comparing them with the options if you have the option of MCQ. And if it is not MCQ, the other part that comes is, if it is not MCQ, what are we supposed to do then? A question which generally comes up is, are we supposed to take up and write exactly as it is given in the passage? So the answer is no. Please do not. They are not asking you to copy paste the lines exactly as they have given in the passage. That is what they are precisely asking you not to do. They are precisely asking you to write it in your own words. Even if the instruction, whether it is given or whether it is not given, it is a by default it goes, you are not supposed to copy from the passage. Please do not. Especially the often what happens is, we see when we check papers, like students will reproduce the words of which they have not understood the meaning. So try and comprehend the meaning whatever you can from in and around that word, and do not, maybe putting out 1 2 words exactly from the passage is fine, because you find that is the most appropriate word that could have been used, that is fine. But of course keep in mind the fact that you are not asked to copy. Do not copy the answers. And the second important thing is, keep in mind the tense of the questions. For example, they will, if they are asking if the question is in the present tense, then and the question is in the present tense, the passage is also running in the present tense or in the continuous tense, remember, despite all of those in the present tense, you are not supposed to answer in that. You are generally supposed to answer the questions in the past tense, unless it is a running narrative like a cricket commentary, or unless it's a very vivid narration, or not description, it's a very vivid narration of an incident which someone sees happening live in front of their eyes. For example, you see that I looked out of my window when, and also that brings me to the third part of the thing. Keep in mind the person through whom you are answering the question. The first thing is, do not, the three things which I told you is, do not copy from the passage, do not copy from the passage, do not use the same words unless it's very appropriate and you think there could be no other word which can be as appropriate. The third is keeping the tense in mind. The third is keeping the tense in mind. Keep the tense. Remember, this has to go in the past tense. Even the questions will not be generally asked to you in the past tense, they will be in the present tense. But remember that your answer has to come to them in the past tense. It shouldn't be in other, unless it is something very vivid in description or narration. It's a descriptive narrative, which can only be described in the present tense. For example, a scene where people, there is a scene of the battle, or there is a cricket commentary which is going. Unless things are of this sort, we are not supposed to take the present tense while we are trying to understand the question. Okay. The next part that comes is, keep in mind the, okay, so third part is keeping in mind the, we did the vocabulary thing, we did the tense thing. Now keeping in mind the person of the passage. Remember that we need to keep in mind, there are three person, there can be first person narrative where the passage is being narrated as I did this, I did that, that is the first person. The second person is you, which is very rare, which will almost not occur. It will either be in third person mostly, or the first person. The third person is where there is a narrator who is narrating it, that this person went there, this person saw this, this person saw that. That's the third person narrative. So generally it will be in either first person, or it would be in third person narrative. So now what is important is, when it is third person narrative, you already know that you are supposed to talk about as the author said, the speaker said, or the name of the characters. But when it is in first person, for example, if it is a first person and the person is saying I looked out of my window, please, when you are writing your answers, do not write in the passage I looked out of my window, because it is not you who are looking. The moment you say I looked out of my window, it represents as if you are looking out of the window, but that is not the case. It was the author or the narrator or the poet or a certain character who looked out of the window. So please be careful about when you are writing answers and in which person you are writing the answer. So if it is the author, if a line says I looked out of the window and found this and this happened, when you write in and the question comes, for example, there is a passage which describes a garden. A garden is described from the window. So what happens is, author says, as I looked out of my windows, I found lovely petunias blooming. I found lovely petunias I found out lovely petunias. So when you represent the same question in your own answer, you will say that the author found out, or the writer, the narrator, the author. And also keep in mind whether it's the author or the narrator. The author and the narrator are not the same person. The author is a person who has written that, and the narrator is a person who is saying that. So keep in mind whether it's the author who is saying all this, or whether it's the narrator who is saying this, right? So when we are trying to write it, see whether it's, be very careful whether you are writing the author of the passage or whether it's the narrator of the passage. Do not confuse them. The author and the narrator might be the same people, and the author and the narrator might be different people. So be very careful about what you are saying. So that is one very important, these are the very few important things which we always need to keep in mind while solving any comprehension. So along with that, we have received a question which says that give us an example of how to write an answer in our own effective words in the comprehension. So for that, we'll with that we'll come to the example of reading a passage. For example, we'll just read this like, so the passage which we read here is, just give us a second. Okay, so the passage was, Donald Trump's surprise win in the US presidential election has lent the dollar the new wings. It has soared against the most currencies, including rupee, on the expectation that this economic policies will spur growth and inflation in the world's largest economy. I'll read this once again. Donald Trump's surprise win in the US presidential election has lent the dollar's new wings. It has soared against most currencies, including rupee, on the expectation that this economic policy will spur growth and inflation in the world's largest economy. So this talks about what happened with Trump's win and how the dollar currency was affected because of that. So for example, you are given the question, how do you think the dollar was affected with the win of Donald Trump? So your answer should be effectively that Donald Trump's win in the US presidential election gave the dollar new value. Do not exactly reproduce it as has lent the dollar new wings. Has lent the dollar new wings means that it has soared up to a certain level. So has given it new wings means it has taken up certain new heights. So you will not say that exactly has lent the dollar the new wings. And if for example, we will expect that you will understand something understand this, but if you do not understand that, that is the last case when you are maybe using the words given in the passage. But please don't do that. It is the best practice is not to do that. That is at least better than leaving out the answer completely and coming home. That is maybe still the last option, but you will never get the marks that you are supposed to. So if you are just reproducing this line, you will say, and the next line, it has soared against most currencies, including the rupee, on the expectation that this economic policy will spur growth and inflation in the world's largest economy. So it has soared against most currencies. So you can say that it has increased its value against most currencies, including the rupee, with the expectation that the economic policies will create growth in the economy, as well as will inflate the world's largest economy. That is how exactly you are supposed to reproduce in your own words. I'll read what was there in the passage originally and how I have translated it once more. Donald Trump's surprise win in the US presidential election has lent the dollar new wings. It has soared against most currencies, including the rupee, on the expectation that this economic policy will spur growth and inflation in the world's largest economy. So we will reproduce it as, this is one of the ways of reproducing. Certainly you all can do it in various other ways. I'm just, since this is an impromptu answer that I'm giving right now, so I did with what, this is one way. Maybe if you have a little more time to think, you can even make it more precise and concise. And of course, remember one thing, when you are answering, it should be clear, precise and concise. That is the most important part about answering a comprehension. It has to be clear, precise and concise. And do not use big words if you do not know the meaning of it. Just because you read a word somewhere 10 days back and you thought, let me put it in, just sprinkle it like with some salt, don't do that, because you might just get very wrongly rubbed with a word which you have used and you don't know the meaning of. So do not use words of which you do not know the meaning. And the second part of that is, use smaller words when it can do not use big words when you can do it with a smaller word. So these are the few very basic ground rules. Like, nobody is in the competitive level examinations, nobody is probably testing your literature funda. What they are testing is like how clearly, concisely, briefly you can write what is there in the passage. Often what happens in the UPSC passages are, they're very cryptic in their meanings. What happens is, like, the passage is really difficult and they have a passage which is there for 1000 words, could have gone on for 2000 words, and there are very cryptic lines in the passages, and they will ask you questions with exact reference to context. When they're giving you questions with as reference to context, they're putting up a line and then ask you a question from there. What you will do is, maybe you have to elaborate on a certain point or a certain line. Only these are the questions when you can use your pre-approved knowledge of other things. When they are asking you for your own opinion, like your own opinion, your own criticism, are only the places when you are supposed to give them. If not, do not make assumptions and write the answers. Always stick to what is in the passage. If you have confusion, read and reread the passages as many times as you want to. So with that, we come back to this. So the answer would be, like, if we are supposed to, if the question is, how did the US presidential affect the currency, affect the dollar? So it would be like Donald Trump's the surprise. Do not again write surprise win. Please write sudden win or unexpected win or unfathomable win. Any of these, could you try and use better synonyms as synonyms, but which should be very appropriate, very close to the one that is given. Okay, so Donald Trump's sudden win in the US presidential election had given the dollar new value. What it did was, it made dollar increase in its value as compared to all the other currencies in the world, including the Indian rupee, with the hope that this economic policy will help to spur growth, will be replaced as will help to increase the growth and the inflation in the world's largest economy. So we'll take word by word and replace it with other words. Please be careful when you are doing this, and try and be as appropriate as you can in your choice of words, because when they're micro checking the answers, of course they would also be evaluating you on your vocabulary. There are other places where you would be just judged for your vocabulary, but other than this is a very good way of testing your vocabulary. When we are doing the essays is one of the place where they are actually testing your vocabulary, your writing skills, how concisely and precisely you can write things. And of course, do not spill over your answers. That is one very important thing. If you think that, do not over elaborate and do not spill over your answers. Like, don't make your answers like as if it is all over the place. Your answers should be like in a contained manner. It shouldn't be spilled all over the place. Your answers should always be very precise, and do not go repeating the same point again and again. Along with that, we come to another point which we should keep in mind while answering the passages is, that's the fourth point. If you find that the answer to two questions are almost becoming similar, read the question properly. They will never generally ask you questions which will have the same answers. They will always ask you from, there are plenty of things that there's to ask. So it is generally taken as a known fact that they will not ask you from the questions which they have asked once. So if you think that the answer is becoming too similar to a question which you have already answered, keep a look at the tab. Maybe you are not going ahead in the right direction. Okay, so now we'll go ahead a little more in the passage, which says, the prospect of Federal Reserve raising interest rates provided an updraft that helped the dollar extend a record appreciating streak against the euro last week and pushed the rupee past 68 to a dollar. So mostly, if you have maybe you have understood the meaning, but I'll read it once more since we are just answering them orally. We'll look at it this way. The prospect of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates provided an updraft that helped the dollar extend a record appreciating streak against the euro last week and pushed the rupee past 68 to a dollar. So if you have to repeat, for example, and the question comes, how did it affect, or what was the effect of other currencies against dollar? So we'll write it as the prospect of the Federal Reserve. We can just replace this word and we can say as the Federal Reserve raised the interest rate, it provided an updraft, you can say an increase in the last week dollar, extending a record appreciating streak. You can drop off the adjectives. They have lifted it up from a paragraph, appreciating streak. Also remember, if there are word limits to the answer to which you have to stick to. There are sometimes word limits, according to your marks, there are certain word limits to which you should stick to a passage. So remember, do not use unnecessary adjectives. If it is a very descriptive paragraph, for example, this is a very informative paragraph. This is talking about Donald Trump's wins, the election. It is purely based on economics. So we are really not looking for the beauty of the passage. What we are looking for in the passage is the overload of information that it is giving us, and your answers should exactly reproduce the information which is being there in the passage. Only if it's a very descriptive paragraph will you be asked to use words which will describe the passage as well as the one that is given. So you can just easily drop off this word, extend a record appreciating streak against the euro last week. So we can just drop the word appreciating, we can just say extend a record streak against the euro. You can replace the word streak as an record rise or a continuous rise against the euro last week, and we can replace this word that pushed the dollar to that pushed the rupee past 68 to a dollar. How will we write that? Is that we will not certainly write exactly the way this is. You can learn it for using it somewhere else. But what we'll write is, and the Indian rupee measured as low as 68 compared to the dollar. So that is what it means. So whenever we are trying, so this is what I wanted to make, as a very focus of the entire comprehension level that we are having here is like, do not take the words from the passages. First try and understanding them. And the only way that you can understand the passages from a given point is that when you have the experience of reading it. At least try reading one passage, one paragraph, a short news, something where from anywhere, somewhere you get through your entire week. At least if nothing, read your newspapers on Sundays. The best way to increase your vocabulary and understand how perspectives are shaped are the editorials. There are very good editorials in newspapers coming up. Try and read the editorials, even if you think that you're not very interested in all the news that goes from the headlines to some part of the newspaper should interest you. It's either the films, the media, the games, something must be interesting you. So just take it up from anywhere you feel like. And the best way I think is to read the editorials, because the editorials will always not just teach you about vocabulary and words, the editorials will also teach you on how to write something, because editorials generally have a perspective which they are taking while reading, and the perspective is what you need to learn while you are writing your answers. For example, they have asked for your opinion. If they have also, there's one this important thing that, like, if they ask you to discuss something, when they give you a statement and say discuss, it could come as an essay also. So this is an important point. Like if they say like a healthy mind resides in a healthy body, discuss. Whenever you have the word discuss, remember you are supposed to argue for both the sides, both for and against, that you think it is so and you don't think it is so. So that is what the word discuss means. Discuss means you are supposed to give a neutral kind of balance in your answers. But when they say whether do you support it or you don't support it, if you are trying to write an answer or an essay, of course essays would be much extended versions of your answer. Keep this in mind that you will give an argument which will be talking about any one side that you are taking. Do not write answers or essays in the way so that it means that you are taking all the sides. And that is what I call being all over the place. Even you do not know what you want to support. Your answers should not come out as that you are supremely confused about what you are writing. If you seem confused, your examiner gets even more confused, and that leads to a loss of marks. So first think on which side of ballot you want to argue for. So argue on the side that you want to do, and then you will be writing your answers. So if you want to say something for the motion, go for the motion. In between, do not start speaking against the motion. What you can do is, in the concluding paragraphs of the answer, maybe if your answer is like quite long, maybe it's 500 words or something, in the end you can certainly, of course, if there are a number of points, this is one very good practice. If there are a number of points which you have to include in your answer, it is better that you break it up into paragraphs, because the examiner shouldn't lose the patience while reading your answer. So it is a good thing if you can break it up into paragraphs. If you are breaking up into paragraphs towards the end, where you are writing kind of a conclusion, if the answer is that long that you have the position to write a conclusion, at the end maybe you can say one or two line against or for the motion which you're taking. For example, you had supported something, now you can say, okay, these were the advantages of this. Now I want to say, but also these are the disadvantages. But certainly that does not outnumber the advantage. That is how you close an answer. You will never leave your opinion looming on the idea of the examiner. The examiner shouldn't be free to interpret, like, do not self-contradict yourself anywhere in the question paper. That is one very important thing which we need to understand while answering any of it. So do not self-contradict yourself at all. Even if you say that there are 5 disadvantages and maybe there are 3 disadvantages, but still the advantages are being outnumbered by 2. So at the end we will have to, when we finish the answer, that is what the conclusion of the answer should do. So they should say that, okay, despite there being 3 disadvantages, there are 5 advantages. So it is always being outnumbered by 2, and that is why I support this motion. And that is why I think we should argue for the answer in this way. So that is one very important thing. Do not sound confused or self-contradicting yourself in the answer sheet, because and also keep in mind that you shouldn't sound self-contradicting. It's not just in the one answer, but like your answer shouldn't exactly go from one spectrum to another. It shouldn't be like you are talking about something else in answer 1, and in answer 2 you completely go and strain your strategy. There should be a certain thread or lineage across which you should be speaking. So it shouldn't be going around anywhere. There should be a certain point or trajectory of argument that should come out from all your answers. And remember to channelize those answers in a proper way. I mean, do not just spill them over. That is what I'm saying repeatedly. The examiner will really not have the time to go over a spilled over answer, or a very over elaborate or a very over exaggerated answer. So that is one very important thing. So as we were doing the passage, it says, in the congressional testimony last week, Fed Chair Janet Yellen signaled the central bank was close to a decision to appreciable acceleration in 2017, with one projection positing even a doubling of the pace by the fourth quarter. If the new administration delivers some of the promise, including tax cuts, deregulation and infrastructure spending. So this says that in the congressional testimony last week. So you can just replace the word testimony as a declaration, or you can replace it as a official statement. We have to try and think. Of course, always synonyms will not come exactly in one word to one word. It's better if we can. If we cannot, at least a phrase would also do. So like when we want to replace the word in Congress testimony last week, we'll take it up as in Congress's statement last week, or we can say the official statement last week. That would make it even better. Fed chair, the federal chair. Do not, if you want to Fed chair, I hope you all understand the meaning. That is a chairperson of the federal bank that they are talking about. The name of the person had signaled that the central bank was close to a decision to raise the rates again. Was close to a decision. Like what you can write is, do not spend so many words. You can just say that they wanted to raise the decision. They wanted to raise the rates again. Economics predicted that US GDP growth could see appreciable acceleration in 2017, with one projection posting even a doubling of a pace by the fourth quarter if the new administration delivers on some of its promises. Projection positing. So you can replace this word as, this project is being replaced as doubling the pace of a fourth quarter. Instead of saying, you can just say that increasing the pace in the next quarter. So this is how we can try and reproduce the words. That is how it is given in the passage. Also, if you all want us to give you all passages for you to solve, do let us know by writing it at the end of the comments section below, so that we can provide you with the with a few I mean at least one or two examples on how you, I mean this was done orally, but if you all want it so that we can put it down in the chat, just let us know about it. So once before we end today's lecture, we'll just recap the things which we did while answering a passage. Answering a passage would go through two readings, a scan reading and a scheme reading. The first has to be a scheme reading, that is a fast reading of the entire passage, and then what we have is a scan reading. The scan reading would be the detailed reading, but that happens only after reading the questions once. If they are MCQs, better, you know the answers, you at least have an option to choose from. If not, if you have to write your own answers, the scan reading becomes even more important, because then you have to understand line by line of the answer. So that is the first two things. And while practicing or writing your answers, there are a few things which you should keep in mind. That is, first is the time management. Second is not directly copying from the passage. Third is do not use the same words given in the passage, and also not phrases. The next would be to keep in mind the tense. Of course, try and use the past tense unless it is for narrative descriptions. Be clear, precise and concise in your answers. Keep in mind the person of the passage, the I and the you and the they and the he and the first, second, third person. Generally passages would come in either first or third person. If it is third person, great. If it is first person, keep in mind to translate that as the third person in your answer. Next would be, always whenever you are writing answers, do not confuse your examiner while writing the answers. Take a particular stance and do not keep changing your stance in between the same answers. It should come out as a proper argument about your own ideas. So do not spill your answers over, as I said a number of times in this. Like, do not sound as if you are all over the place. So that these are the few tips and tricks which you should always follow while solving a comprehension. Hope that helps some of you. So with this, we'll end our today's lecture. Thank you and have a great day.